Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about what it takes to scale artificial intelligence, including the best enterprise architecture and strategy to build out an AI deployment. To discuss that, I'm joined by two industry experts. With me is Zachary Smith, Global Head of Edge Infrastructure Services at Equinix. Zach, good to have you on board today.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining me is Justin Boitano, Vice President, Enterprise and Edge Computing at Nvidia. Justin, hello to you and happy Friday.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Looking forward to the conversation.
So I think AI is a tough topic for companies for all sorts of reasons. What are the challenges companies face as they work to deploy AI at scale? Is it primarily a data management challenge, or is it far more than that? Zach, what is your take?
Well, here at Equinix, we're what we like to call ourselves the world's digital infrastructure company. What that really means is we put a lot of physical infrastructure around the world and help people turn it on. And so from my vantage point, people struggle with getting the right physical infrastructure into the right places and making it available to their internal users. I think there's much more fundamental challenge we have today, whether it's related to supply chain challenges, the fact that workload needs to be very close to its data, which often means that it's distributed around the world, or even the sustainability and power challenges that people have running these type of cutting edge applications. We feel that, customers, enterprises in particular, need just more help to remove the friction. So that's the first point I like to focus on is like, how can we get the infrastructure into the right place, connected to the right counterparties and data at the right time, and make it consumable by those end users?
Justin, what would you add? What are the challenges companies face as they work to deploy AI at scale?
Yeah, some of the things that we see, obviously, when enterprises start trying to move down this path of AI, is they're afraid that their current staff don't have the skills that are needed to be able to deploy AI. And so we've been spending a lot of time trying to, I'll say, provide easy ways to get access to infrastructure and hands-on labs to help IT staff upskill and basically learn, how to train common AI models to solve business challenges that we see being common patterns for, to address staffing shortages through, services like chatbots or vision systems to drive shelf replenishment in retail, to help them deal with call it supply chain reoptimization through data science, and potentially come up with new ways to help them drive sales growth through recommendation engines and other AI services. So really it's how do you make it easy to upskill, kind of to learn how to deploy these AI patterns at scale.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's a real question that companies face into the staffing issue. Is it realistic to think, well, we can upskill our existing employees, or must they think we're simply going to have to hire some more staff? But what advice would you give there, Justin?
Well, I think it's actually much more approachable than people think, right? And so between us and Equinix, we built this program that we call Launchpad that runs on Equinix metal locations in 9 geographies globally. So people can get access to the infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean servers, the orchestration management software, and I'll call it sample AI workflows that are very easy to get started with guides on like every step you need to take to go from zero to a Q&A chatbot as an example, and you can do that in a day or so. And so I think once we give people kind of these easy on ramps and they learn how easy it is to kind of retrain staff, a lot of your staff can get you really, really far in these initiatives to get going.
All right, let's talk about architecture. I mean, what is the ideal architecture for enabling AI at scale? And that's a big question, I realize. Zach, your take on that?
Well, I probably know a lot less about that topic than Justin does, but I do think it matters what scale is, right? And that's different for every counterparty. So some enterprises scale is, I'm just doing my first AI modeling, and I have this we want to upskill, we want to learn, we want to get started. Some are like very mature in their journey and are looking to put this either with an extreme amount of deep learning capabilities or with a lot of results capabilities with inference across their footprint. So I think scale really does, is more of a personal question depending upon where the business is at, what workload they're trying to solve, et cetera. But regardless of that, I think the point that Justin made around upskilling is applicable here, because one of the real challenges that I think we've been working on together between Equinix and Nvidia is just make it easier to get started. And that might be easier to get started with AI using these frameworks and infrastructure, just remove some of that friction. It might also mean easier to get it to production. You've done all the work, you've built your models, now you got to scale it out. And so just taking that from the life cycle of saying, how can we get more people on that journey with less friction? And then when they're ready, help them take it to production across a global footprint or where it needs to be.
Justin, what are your thoughts in terms of the ideal architecture for enabling AI at scale?
Yeah, I think the architecture depends on where the data is being generated. So you can imagine if you're talking about using vision AI to do shelf replenishment, there's so much video that's being generated in stores. You're going to want, the compute closer to that edge retail location. If you're, looking at, I'll say, a recommendation engine that's making recommendations based on like how you're navigating a web page, like you want the recommendation engine to be running near where that web service is running. And again, there might be reasons that you want to localize it and have, different, let's say, regions that you can support that for localization regions and such. But really, it's you want the compute next to, where the data is generated, so you can, drive kind of real-time immediate outcomes, to provide either customers the best shopping experience through a web page, or in the case of retail, drive the efficient business outcomes without having to backhaul all that data into the cloud, as an example.
All right, let's look at a real world example. Continental and its self-driving vehicles. I want to hear about this one. Zach, what are the details on this one?
Well, I think it's really highlighting some of the real world challenges that enterprises are looking to solve with AI. And so Continental Auto, it's come to Equinix and Nvidia, working with its partner IBM, really trying to solve some of its climate mission. I think they have a Vision Zero target around their facilities, around injuries, around crashes, et cetera. So they're using AI to address these like very, very big problems, and use the data throughout their supply chain and related to get there. And so they were able to use Nvidia technology, including IBM storage and whatnot. And this is kind of a good corollary that happens a lot in enterprise journeys, is that depending upon their data set and depending upon their work like they're trying to do, that there has to be some kind of adjustments and whatnot based upon the frameworks. But they were able to deploy this and work towards these kinds of outcomes much faster by basically having AI infrastructure available in the right location at the right time. I think it's incredible to see the number of diverse use cases that enterprises have, either from, as Justin's saying, how do I make my shopping experience have recommendations that we're all used to how do we get to zero crashes across our suppliers and customers.
Yeah, my Uber driver did take his hands off the wheels a couple of weeks back, and actually his Tesla was driving itself, and I thought, oh, this is closer than I thought. Justin, any thoughts about self-driving vehicles?
Well, I think self-driving cars is really kind of the penultimate, I guess, implementation of AI, right? Like you've got level 5 self-driving cars as vision of having like robo taxis that can take you around the world and obviously do it in a very safe, reliable way. And that journey for automotives, requires them obviously to build, we were saying, like AI infrastructure, build, I'd say the tooling to help their data scientists, train and test models, label real world data sets, and then push those models out to, I'll call it, they're almost like they're robots, right? That are running around the world with a number of different sensors on them, from cameras to LiDAR to radar, and kind of using sensor fusion to really get a good perception of what's happening in the physical world. And there's this continuous cycle of, build the model, push the model to production, learn how the model reacts in the real world, and kind of bringing back that into the data center to retrain the models. And so I think it's a great example of kind of the Uber journey that all these like AI driven companies are going through.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the big question that's on many people's minds is, where is AI going, and how can we go there first, or how can we prep for that? So what is your forecast for the future of enabling AI at scale? What milestones can we expect? Zach, what do you say?
Well, I think what you're going to continue to see is just an incredible leapfrogging capabilities, right? We seem to be in this, what do you call it, a Cambrian explosion of innovation that's happening in AI. And it's feeding off of itself because enterprises are starting to use this or impacting the technology, which is, moving faster to meet those. So I think we're just at this area where there's so much innovation that is accessible to people that we're going to start to see just incredible outcomes, but we're also going to see much more demands on the infrastructure. We're seeing a lot more data. So it's way more storage, way more data transferring, whether it's coming in from those edge locations or coming in from your data lakes and whatnot. And that's going to be interconnected in a cost-efficient, hyper-secure, and high-speed way. So here at Equinix, we're really focused on how do we make sure that we service those ecosystems as enterprises move their applications to be intelligent or autonomously intelligent in this regard. And then I think the secondary aspect that we think about, and I'll let Justin kind of comment related to the kind of tech stack above it, but we think about the sustainability. It's the power densities, the cooling requirements. Nvidia and Equinix are working together on liquid cooled GPU infrastructure. How can we take what right now is becoming an exponentially more capable computer with, actually it's got a great yield curve in terms of the amount of watts consumed per output, right? And I'm sure, so it's much more efficient to move to the newer generations of processors and whatnot, but they do require more power and they generate more heat. And so how can we use our sustainability efforts around renewable energy, around heat capture, and alternative ways to cool so that we can really continue to do this in a responsible way throughout the world?
Zach, what about the cooling technology? What state is that in? Is it nascent? Is it mature? What is your view on that?
Well, no, it's actually getting pretty mature. So
Yeah.
Nvidia and Equinix have been working together on liquid cooling. We have active labs working together. I think really the issue is, use the word scale earlier. We've got a global footprint of over 250 data centers operating in many jurisdictions. I think it's 69 markets around the world. And so as you move into new types of, whether it's coolants or liquids or operational things, we're at the stage where we're starting to productionize this type of technology across our global footprint. So I think you'll see in the coming years that moving to newer and more disruptive ways of cooling, heat capturing and powering our, digital lives will become pretty commonplace.
So Justin, what do you see if you look into your crystal ball, the future of enabling AI at scale? What are the details there?
Well, I think in some ways, we're way into this, but we're just at the beginning, right? The research keeps showing these exponential increases in model size and model complexity, which means, they can continue to take more and more data in and drive, more accurate outcomes. So as Zach was saying, being able to feed the models, it is going to be kind of a growing challenge, right? So the processors will get bigger, the models will get bigger, the amount of data that we're going to feed into them is going to get higher and higher. And to the extent that you can run that infrastructure, in the right location where the data is being generated is going to be kind of key to scaling this globally.
You know what I think is really particularly challenging for companies is artificial intelligence, obviously very difficult. I know that the two of you have the word edge in your job title, and that's in many ways also a newer market for companies. So it's like, how are we dealing with the edge deployment? How are we dealing with AI? That's a lot of new stuff all at once. I mean, I don't know what my question is, but I just think that those poor companies out there who need to get on board with this for sure. Zach, what are your thoughts on this major complexity out there?
Well, just add into it, labor shortages and reskilling, a couple other things, and it's a pretty tough job out there for enterprises who are going through digital transformation or investing heavily in digital. My thought process and my suggestion is lean on your partners. I think that's where companies like Equinix and Nvidia coming together, we recognize this. This is a lot. This is super challenging. At the same time, in a lot of industries, it's kind of non-negotiable, right? You must figure out how you're going to take advantage of these capabilities, how you're going to improve your operations or your outcomes. And so what we're trying to do is just remove some of that friction. How can we help you get there faster? How can we remove some of the, deployment headache? How can we make it more repeatable? How can we make it more automated? And so I think that, enterprises, don't worry, we're here to help you. But be willing to go on this journey with us. And, I think we can have some pretty incredible outcomes.
Zach, what if you put yourself in the shoes of those poor companies who have to handle AI and edge at the same time? I mean, what any consolation for them?
Well, I mean, like putting it in the right place to do that will save you a lot of money. And so that's one thing that Justin mentioned on, bringing all that data back to some location just so you can do something with it, just to get it back out. That's very expensive. And so when you're looking at new edge models where you can now using application infrastructure like Kubernetes or whatnot, deploy workload throughout, dozens of locations, if you can actually do some of your intelligent workload closer to where the data is coming in, that's going to save you a lot of money. Very similar to network transformations you may have done. Instead of bringing and backhauling everything, try and service the content out where you need it. And so I think we've seen that in a couple other industries. So we'll see that now here with an intelligent edge, bringing more of that capabilities out towards the edge of the network.
All right, so it's a lot of good stuff. Justin, if people want to learn more, what can they do?
Yeah, I'd recommend if people want to learn more, they should come to our GPU Technology Conference. The next one is coming up September 19th. It's a virtual conference where we have thought leaders across automotive and manufacturing and financial services, really talking about how they're taking AI into production and the business value that they're achieving through artificial intelligence.
And I'm assuming people can sign up at the Nvidia website.
Yeah, you can sign up. It's free to access, and there's hundreds of talks to go watch and learn.
Sounds cool. I appreciate the two of you being on today, and I'll try to check out the conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thank you so much.